Bing bong.
This is the I, Dan Simpson Show.
We do it because it's right.
I love the dialectic.
His testicles became swollen.
Based.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come. Please clap.
Who's this man? This man in the hat. I'm gonna ruin this.
You're a stupid baby, Dan. Not me.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leftist and Chill with me, your host, Dan Simpson. Very happy to be with you today. Today on the show, Robbie Martin, journalist, filmmaker, and musician. He writes for the magazine White Fungus and the Oakland-based news website Media Roots, founded with his sister, Abby Martin, with whom he also co-hosts a regular podcast, which is a really good one, Slaps. It slaps, that's what the kids say. Robbie is also the mind behind the documentary shorts. You may have heard of them, American Bisque, American Anthrax, and now the full-length documentary trilogy, a very heavy agenda. Welcoming in Robbie Martin. Robbie, how you doing today? What's up? Please clap. Everyone, please clap.
I'm doing great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for being with me. I'm sorry I cut you off there. I'll try to do better at that. Robbie, thank you very much for, being willing to chat with me today on my little tiny talk show. This is pretty much where me and the rest of my chat, where we're like sitting in the proverbial back row of class, and I invite my based and never cringe guests to let us know what they're up to, and that's sort of the gist of the show. Sounds good?
Sounds great. Yeah.
All right, I appreciate that. So let's go ahead, and I think we can get to know you a little bit because, as I think some folks who've watched my stream, they know about Abby. I've produced a live show with Abby and Mike for Empire Files a couple months back. That was a lot of fun. So I think today we'll go ahead and spend a little time getting to know you a little bit, just maybe at like personal level, and also from there I want to talk about obviously your documentary trilogy. I really love that, and then I think we got a couple other things that are on the docket for today. So have you ever been on Twitch before, Robbie?
You know, I have like once, I think.
Yeah.
Before, so no, this is like, I'm very new to Twitch, so it's only my second time.
All right. Do you have any questions about Twitch, how it works or anything?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I was considering using it myself a while back, but no, I mean, I kind of get it. The only thing I don't get exactly is like, who are the Twitch celebrities? Like, who are like the top? Who's in the top 5 bracket of Twitch streamers?
It sort of depends on like the content, I guess. If you're talking like politics, I guess we're talking Hassan. You know, he's at the top of my food chain, as you will.
So it's not. So there's a lot of people obviously not doing politics. I mean, it's mostly gaming, right?
It is gaming, and that brings me to my next question. This can make or break you, Robbie. Are you ready? What video games do you play?
Right now, I'm not playing jack shit. Probably the last game I played, honestly, was Super Mario Maker 2.
Nice.
That's the one I go back to probably the most. I sold pretty much every video game console I had besides the Switch, so that's all I have right now. But I have a very, very like fully stacked emulation PC that I had someone build for me about a year and a half ago. So like I pretty much have like every game ever made on that system, like up to PS3. So like my game choices are plentiful, but I have a very short attention span when it comes to games lately. Thank you. It hasn't really been anything that's truly caught my attention. I mean, I've heard people playing like Elden Ring. That sort of seems interesting to me, but yeah, man, I'm really out of the loop when it comes to games. especially the new stuff. Like I don't really check. I'm more of a retro gamer, I guess, is probably the
retro games. That goes over really well here. I'm pretty sure there's Mario Maker communities out there. Hell yeah. All right. Well, I think you passed the test, the Twitch sniff test, and so I'd love to jump right in. I got so much that I want to talk to you about. This is like the first time I've actually prepared for an interview, so thanks for pushing me.
You're welcome.
Okay, so a little bit more about you that I learned, as we mentioned, maybe at the top or before we went live here. I can't remember what we mentioned, but you are a musician. You got your project, Fluorescent Gray. I was listening to it this morning on Spotify, and I enjoyed the sounds that were coming into my ear holes. Well done with that. Real quick, do you like play all the instruments and sing and record and mix? Or like what's going on over there?
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it mostly as an electronic music project. So I don't do much singing on it. I think maybe I've like sang once on a record, but it's mostly, I guess, what people describe as instrumental, sort of sound design focused electronic music. And some of the stuff I used to do, I guess, falls into the category of like IDM, like if people are familiar with like Aphex Twin or Autechre, groups like that. But I've been moving more into like rock music territory lately. Still instrumental, but I'm basically applying an electronic music workflow to rock music, where I have like a robot controlled drum set and guitars that I've been making music on. So that's been fun and weird. Yeah.
All right. That's cool. That's cool. I also do music. I just like sing songs. I don't write anything. I'm the least interesting person you'll ever meet. I'm the most mediocre white man. So everyone gets to feel good sitting next to me. Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Let me like launch into this to personalize this a little bit here for us, Robbie. About a week or two back, I saw, I don't know how I got my eyes on this Reddit post where your video, part 2 of your series, and we'll talk a lot about this. I got a lot to ask you about. Was posted, and well, there were some really interesting comments about it. The top comment on the thread was someone, I would like to say, lib squealing and sort of complaining about how your film like looked like Russian propaganda, and because of that they didn't want to watch it. And one of the things they pointed to was they were like, the film said that in 2014 there was a coup in Ukraine, and that's why it was suspicious to them. And I'm like, what? That absolutely happened, and now I have to watch it. So thanks for this like opposite of a recommendation, knowing how baby-brained their knee-jerk response was to that. So we ended up watching it. I think I can't remember if I watched it on stream or in my Discord with my community. I got a lot out of it. It helped me to wrap my head around what's happening in Ukraine and Russia, and you drove home the point of like modern neoconservatism, and in a way that without the film I wouldn't have got it. It just got to this point real quick where every time someone of like one of the bad dudes, James Kirchick or Eli Lake, anytime they showed up, anytime Robert Kagan showed up, I would always just hit the button, and it just started to like literally thread it together for me. And they got their fucking hands in every fucking pie. It drove me nuts. Okay, so let me reel back. Robbie, your film is broken into 3 parts. Would you mind briefly explaining each part? The first is a catalyzing event. Part 2, which is what we watched, how we learned to stop worrying and love the new neocons. A little play on a Doctor Strange love. We love it. And number 3, part 3, maintaining the world order. And again, I've only watched 2, so I can't wait to watch the others.
Well, I'm glad that you actually like saw it posted on Reddit, because that was an interesting experience for me. Most of my stuff usually remains relatively underground and doesn't even like get posted on forums like that. So it was interesting just going in there in general. Like at first I think I maybe saw a Google alert. I probably still have one set up for the movie. So I jumped in the subreddit itself first, and I was just like struck by how many documentaries were in the subreddit boosted that were like anti-Russian propaganda. Like it was like filled with like every documentary pretty much ever made in the last 10 years that's like very focused on how Putin is the new Hitler, how the Russians use steroids in the Olympics. Like every single type of genre of like possible anti-Russian documentary you can imagine was boosted in that subreddit. So I was like, okay, this is not going to be a good reaction to my movie. I already like knew it, because
here we go.
I've been told, like, I don't know, maybe last year by someone that Reddit politics was very like liberal, like it was getting so like liberal propaganda driven to the point where it was basically there was like neocon propaganda in it. Like I remember someone describing to me that there was a lot of like China paranoia even in some of these liberal political discussions. So I was expecting, I had always known that Reddit sort of had this bent to it. And yeah, the forum, I mean, the discussion itself was hilarious. I mean, first of all, someone was trying to devise a conspiracy theory about the movie basically because they hadn't heard of it until now. They were like, this came out in 2015. Why haven't I heard of this until now? This means it's suspicious.
Yeah, right. That's how it works.
Yeah, how come it only has 15 votes on IMDb? It's like, well, it's because it's like a super underground movie that, only like real heads, people who are like really follow stuff really closely, checked out and really enjoyed when it came out. And, I'm glad it's getting new attention now. I mean, I think probably the only reason is because I posted it part 2 for free on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise you got to buy it.
Yeah. So, I mean,
we shall buy. I'm going to raise the money.
Previously paywalled, but part 2 is now free. And part 2, I'll just start by describing part 2 because that's the one that's most relevant. It's basically probably the only documentary made that really goes over how the original situation started in Ukraine, what the U.S. may have done there to meddle in the situation, and how basically the people who were largely involved in this and a lot of the people pushing this were either the same neoconservatives who were behind pushing the Iraq war, or they were relatives of or like new associates of those same neoconservatives from the Bush era. And I mean, that's probably what most fascinated me about making the whole trilogy is that the neocons were back as far as I was concerned, and barely anyone was really covering it except for a few indie journalists like Robert Perry, like Stephen Cohen, RIP. Few of the like people who were, I would consider like left Russia experts were ones who really knew what was going on. And I was very indebted to their work at the time and sort of really following what they had to say. But the first movie, The Catalyzing Event, it's called that because it's a reference to the infamous quote from Project for the New American Century that they wanted a catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor to accomplish all these goals that they had in the year 2000. And the goals included things like domination of air, land, sea, and space. So we've sort of seen, Space Force. Since this document. It also lays out bizarre concepts like race-specific bioweapons as a tool of war in the future. And it also talks about how we need domination of cyberspace. And in a way, I'm not neocons achieved this, but largely the U.S. establishment has achieved both. I mean, I don't know how much space superiority we have at the moment, but we seem to be going there. But cyberspace, having superiority over the internet is something I feel like we have achieved on sort of a backdoor level. I mean, the amount of censorship we're seeing now is clearly being driven by the U.S. government, but it's made to appear that it's being done individually, on these corporations' behalf. But yet we can feel, I think, as a society, people are concerned about this, that it's a system. It is a coordinated, push that, I guess we could still have a First Amendment in this country on paper, but if they keep doing these kinds of things, there's really not going to be much wiggle room left for free speech. Well, I guess we'll still technically have the First Amendment. The first movie is all about how these neoconservatives basically evolved from the Bush era to the Obama era, how they rebranded. And rebranding was a really important exercise for them because their reputations were basically ruined because of the Iraq War. So they tried to become more liberal friendly during the Obama era, and it really worked. I mean, Obama even met with Robert Kagan in the White House. He hired Fred and Kimberly Kagan, his brother and sister-in-law, to work on the Afghanistan surge. And they actually worked directly with David Petraeus in Afghanistan, literally ordering him around. And he even jokes about this in a video that I use I think it's in A Very Heavy Agenda Part 3, which I'll send you a link to after we're done with this. But Part 3, so Part 2 is all about how these neocons were involved in resurrecting this sort of Cold War mentality, but against Putin's Russia. And Part 3 of A Very Heavy Agenda, it sort of goes right up until the presidential election of Donald Trump. I didn't know who was going to win. Probably the biggest mistake I made in Part 3 was I thought Hillary was going to win. So there's some things in there where I spent a lot of time on Hillary. I don't regret doing that. I mean, she does need a lot of focus, but the movie, it basically shows how much how much the Russia hysteria affected the election, how much it played into what happened in Syria, how Syria itself, the US and Russia being involved, could have also flared up into some kind of World War III, if you will, like scenario. And basically the third one, I think it does a good job of kind of really diving into the psyches of all these people too. I give you sort of a brief overview of all these people, and it's sort of about their psyches, in Part 1 and 2 largely. And in Part 3, I sort of show the parents of William Crystal and Robert Kagan. So I sort of show where their influences come from, and sort of this the patriarchs of the neocons, and how that, basically, I mean, Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol's dad, started all this movement. And I just sort of show how it ties all together. And that movie is called Maintaining the World Order, because that is something that the Kagan family and these other neocons believe is our duty as America, is to maintain the world order. That's their friendly way of saying, basically the world's police force. I mean, maintaining the world order doesn't really have that rosy of a sound to it. It still sounds pretty ominous to me, but that's the terminology that they like to use to describe basically maintaining empire.
Okay, so those are the three: catalyzing event, how we learn to stop worrying and love the neocons, maintaining the world order. All right, let's say you had to fuck, marry, and kill each one. What would they be?
Oh my God!
You don't have to take that. You could pass.
I will. I'll take it. Yeah. Look, I know these people, they almost became like family members or something, because I felt like I spent so much time with them, editing their clips and finding their clips that I'll say it. I'll say, fuck Kim Kagan.
Oh.
Marry. I'll remove my gender from the situation. I'll marry Fred and probably kill Robert Kagan, honestly.
Right. There you have it. This is my very serious content that we're making over here. I appreciate that. I'm very much looking forward to seeing parts 1 and 3 for sure. In part 2, if we could circle back to that, obviously Abby makes a big appearance in that, and without having seen that, I would not have understood how Abby found herself at the middle of a worldwide geopolitical media firestorm. She was used up by the mainstream press in her condemnation of Russia's actions in Crimea on her show on RT, and then was embroiled. I don't often get to say that word. She was embroiled in a neoconservative PR whirlwind. And maybe I'm talking over the top here, but and then afterwards was tossed aside. First of all, do you think that's a fair description? And would you mind telling us a little bit about it? And I will preface this by saying that just before you and I were talking, we were watching her on Bree's show on Bad Faith. Going into, actually, it feels like there were a couple more details that I didn't hear in part two. So would you mind feel free to tell us about that in as much depth as you like.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's totally accurate the way you described it, and
Nailing it.
And the full story. I mean, if you want to get like the full picture of what actually would happen to her at RT in general, not just that incident. We just put out a podcast, RIP RT America, the end of an era, all about the closure of RT America, and she kind of goes through that whole incident again, but gives more personal insight into why she ended up leaving. And I think a lot of people have this false impression that basically she left out of protest. You know, it's funny. A lot of people even confuse her and think that she's Liz Wall. Like she'll get a protest, and that's so brave of you for quitting live on television, you know, for standing up against Putin. And it's such a convoluted and strange story that the only way I felt it really could be told is in a movie form, like a documentary form. And we still don't really know the full story. What we do know is that these same neoconservatives that I mean, this is pretty much why my impetus originally for making this film is that, you know, I come from an old school, you know, I'll just say it, 9/11 truther background. I would have considered myself like a 9/11 truther back in the early 2000s. And that project for the New American Century document about a new Pearl Harbor always stuck out to me as something that was, you know, maybe wasn't any kind of evidence of anything that these people might have been involved, but it is very chilling and surreal to read that in that document, at the very least. People can interpret it however they like, but my interpretation of it was, I mean, honestly, I'll just say it. Maybe one of these people involved in this document had some role in 9/11. I mean, I've always thought that. So after that happened, I mean, after that document, years later, my sister takes a stand against what she felt was the Russian editorial line at RT America whitewashing their role in Crimea. And what I say by when I say that, I mean that, you know, Russia Today America, as good as it was at times, there were times where they were really sort of just pumping out the official Russian government line on the situation on the ground there to such an extent that it started to make her uncomfortable, and she felt like she needed to say something about it. And all she said was like basically an end cap, you know, statement at the end of her show that she feels bad for Ukraine as a country, that they're basically being used as a pawn on a geopolitical chessboard, essentially by the United States and Russia. She also acknowledged that she didn't know a whole lot about the situation and she needed to educate herself more. Now, the U.S. media saw this statement, and I guess without really researching her or doing any background, they decided to turn this into an international story, saying this brave journalist spoke out against Russia on a Russian TV channel. And it made headlines everywhere. It became an international story. I mean, if you look at it on Google News or something, you'll still see how many international stories there were about this. Now, this must have captivated the attention of some neocons in DC. When they saw this, they got upset. Not because they hated who Abby was. Well, they probably did if they already knew who she was. But it was because they had a plan of their own that they were cooking up. And Abby had no knowledge of this going on. They were already coaching and basically working with one of Abby's coworkers in secret. And these neocons in DC, and when I say these neocons, I mean literally the Project for the New American Century reopens as a new think tank called the Foreign Policy Initiative. And the
I was ready.
They actually came at Abby, sorry, I missed a step. They didn't come at Abby first. They were working with her coworker Liz Wall in secret, and they were basically hatching this plan where she was going to actually quit live on air. And I think that Abby's statement and what she did, it provoked them and made them upset because they had already had this plan to get one of RT's employees to quit live on air. They had already set it up. And when Abby did this, it maybe stole some of their thunder from that plan that they had, that they were working on. But on the other hand, it also, maybe at first they felt like it stole their thunder, but eventually they're like, wait a second, we can use this. Like, we're RT's now in the international headlines. Let's pump another, let's use this news cycle while it's still hot and do this now. So what they did was, like, literally within a day of Abby making this statement, they had this basically mole at the RT network named Liz Wall quit live on air and become a sort of an instrumental face of this Russian US information war. And she immediately, started saying things like Putin is evil. I basically just going like really hard, really over the top, saying that all RT does is Russian propaganda. But yet she didn't have any real insights to give about what it was really like working at the network or anything like that. She just sort of became this tool. And James Kirchick, as you're showing on the screen,
I hate that guy. What a little slimy turd. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's the absolute worst. He was the neocon employee of this think tank, the Foreign Policy Initiative, who essentially was behind this big story blast. And I mean, the timing of it is what's so funny, Dan, because I don't know if he did it. Someone at the think tank did it. We don't know who did it. They tweeted. I mean, this is the proof right here that all you need to know that this was like a plan of theirs. They tweeted, the think tank Twitter account tweeted, tune into RT in 30 minutes. Something big is about to happen. So they knew that Liz Wall was going to quit live on air within 30 minutes. And then my question is, who were they tweeting that for? Who were they tweeting that out? Why were they tweeting that? And honestly, I think that they wanted to F with Russia. These people in this neocon think tank have like a serious passion about waging information war with Russia, poking Russia in the eye. And I think that this was a way to do that. I think that Russia pays attention to these neocons. And I think that they wanted Russia to know that they had some influence in what was going on. And I think that message was sent very loud and clear. And I don't know, I can't prove that, but I think that that was their goal. They didn't want like regular people in DC to see that and get excited about it. They wanted Russia to see it. And I think Russia did see it, and they know what's up. But on the other hand, the flip side of it, Dan, is that my sister, sadly, the management at Russia Today, they kind of treated her in a punitive fashion after that. And it was kind of a slow motion punishment, kind of, I would say, that occurred until she quit. They basically forced her out by strangling her amount of resources that she was able to use on the show. She had to replace her producer because he also tried to pull a stunt like Liz Wall on her show when she was traveling. We went on like a family trip to Japan. I'll just tell you this story really quick. Yeah. And her producer tried to do like a anti-Assad propaganda piece while subbing in for her show without asking her, without consulting her, basically like doing it as like a big FU to her. Yeah. And she had to fire him because she was like, this is ridiculous that you would have done this. And RT management actually got mad at her. They were mad at her. And this is what she claims. She says that they didn't even watch the segment. They didn't even like comment on what her producer had done. And they just sort of treated Abby like she had misbehaved. And they did it ever since the Crimea statement she made. And I think that she felt underappreciated there and basically under-resourced. They starved and strangled out the amount of resources she had, and she was basically forced to leave. And it's unfortunate because, I mean, a lot of people, I think, remember her show on RT as being one of the more interesting, hard-hitting shows. So I think that it got personal for them, the management there, and it sort of the relationship soured. But she continued on for at least, I want to say, like 8 months after that happened at RT.
So, like, right there, smack dab in the middle of a geopolitical firestorm. And yet, Robbie, the thing that sort of disappoints me, as someone who sits here and streams all day and watches my viewership diminish as I pierce the imperial veil. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, some people still are like, Abby's sus, suspicious, right? Sorry, I don't mean to sound entirely stupid over here, but like they're like, Abby's sus, and I'm like, fucking shit. Like, no, she's the victim here. Like, how do I help people see this? It seems to be something that people seem to be missing. Is that unfair?
Well, I mean, I think that by the very nature that the U.S. Western media originally propped up what she said,
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people who will get like red flags from just that alone and say, well, anybody who gets signal boosted like this is sus. The mainstream media would never do this. I mean, I guess people could maybe even say the same thing about me if they really knew my full background to the beheading video and how
I was. I found a podcast where you were chatting about that, and I was like, "Oh shit!"
Western media blasted out my fake beheading video as real. I mean, like there were real, probably decisions made internally based on the false understanding of people thinking an American soldier had been beheaded in Iraq. I mean, that probably had real consequences. I hope it didn't have terrible ones. I don't know. But like just the fact that my video got onto the news and they ran it. I mean, people could say that I'm sus for that, or that, I mean, people have even said I'm sus for being basically badgered by the FBI, because they simply came at me after that video. So I kind of understand, like, it doesn't offend me too much. I think probably like when people go as far as saying like, well, she must be CIA or something, to that extreme, it's sort of like, well, you've gone pretty too far at that point. I can almost empathize with the idea of thinking that like someone is sus for being, signal boosted to that degree. So it's like, it doesn't bother me too much when people have that initial impression. I think if people knew the full story, like if people actually watched A Very Heavy Agenda 2 and understood the way all the events transpired, it would make more sense to them. But I mean, Dan, you and I both know that like when you get to a certain level of, let's say, I guess, celebritydom or status on the left, and you have some kind of audience, I do think it's automatically you're going to get accused of being sus, or people are going to come at you for that. So, I mean, it is what it is. And, let's just say I went from thinking Glenn Greenwald was a amazing dude to thinking I think he's sus now. Like, I'm like, wait a second, I'm going back 8 years. Like, what was he all about?
Yeah.
So like, I understand it, and Abby's changed some of her opinions well, not really change her opinions. I think what more happened recently was she took a stance on COVID that was like, to certain people or people like in our audience, it was almost like sacrilegious that she, for example, did not dispute the COVID death toll. For example, like there's basic things that people that are sort of conspiratorial find unacceptable to believe at this point. And I think the COVID politics thing sort of really clinched that for me and made that really clear. Like, oh, you can't even agree with these certain things anymore. Otherwise it's like you have to fit every checkbox of X, Y, and Z to be, to virtue signal that you're anti-big pharma, even if you've screamed from the rooftops that these vaccines may be dangerous and that Pfizer's a horribly corrupt company. you didn't talk enough about Fauci or who the other people. I don't even know. I mean, I'm just going off now.
I just muted myself. Okay. I'm a pro streamer. I'm very good at this. It's my first stream. So, yeah, you're talking about the wake of the Nick Berg video, the actual beheading. You noticed that despite the video being super unclear, people were willing to jump to conclusions, and I think maybe that helps us tie into where we are today with what we're seeing. Excuse me. Wow. I'm still going through puberty over here. What do you think, Robbie? I'll get there.
All of us. Happens to the best of us. Yeah.
Okay, excuse me. So, like, what I want to talk about is, and you were mentioning this on your podcast as well with Abby, but it's really super fucking hard to figure out what's going on. So, for me, I've tried to just spend time figuring out what's led up to this, because it's very easy to jump into like, oh, let's look at this video, what's going on, and then you've spent like 15 minutes looking at a 30-second clip and you're like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I don't know, that's me.
3 years ago, and it's like contextualized on Twitter as like, oh, this happened yesterday, and it's like from another country, and you're like, oh shit, like that's not even in Ukraine. I mean, it's even that happens like all the time, from credible people too, like who just don't think when they post stuff. So
yeah, so obviously, like, it's really hard, and I've been trying to focus on like what we can learn about that leads up to this, because that's easier to suss out, you know what I mean? And of course your part 2 of your trilogy was helpful for me, because I'd watched a couple things and I was able to watch it. If I can just say this right now, one thing that I really like is that it's spacious, and you got music that's like got this tense thing that draws it out. And for me, like, it's like something's said, in the film, and then you just wait a couple of seconds, and then something else is said, and in that time, I'm able to like make connections in my head, and it's like very helpful. And for whatever that's worth, I really like that. At the same time, hey, we're also looking forward to the prequels to the trilogy: A Phantom Consensus, Attack of the Drones, and Revenge of the Brick Nations. I that was forced. I understand that last one, sir. Yeah.
I actually, I mean, that's kind of an interesting idea. I mean, and then why not release some special editions where I, CGI out some Robert Kagan's double chin, or whatever.
You can add Jar Jar Binks or take it away. So I don't know where I was going with that, but what I was getting at is that I don't know. I didn't have a question, but I'm finding this really difficult, and I'm finding that it's being in the fog of war, in the vacuum of knowledge, it's being filled by the most sinister people that would fill that space, that would fill that void with fucking mis or disinformation. And of course, the fucking Snake Island, the ghost of Kiev, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, only Russians are doing the disinformation. Only Russians are doing war crimes right now. I was looking at the picture of NATO instructor teaching the room full of the Azov battalion how to use their NLAW anti-tank rocket launchers, and then I literally had someone in chat go, Dan, there aren't as many Nazis as you see. And I'm not even making, like, they use those words like some sort of Jedi Nazi mind trick. Is this how many Star Wars references? I don't even love Star Wars that much, but wow, it's really getting its way in there. Yeah, so I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about what the fuck's going on here?
I mean, well, first of all, I think someone should bronze that and put it on a plaque on a wall, because that's an amazing quote. I mean, I believe it though. I believe people have said things that crazy in this situation. I mean, it's really difficult, Dan, because I mean, I don't know if you saw this already, but historically, I think this is a historical precedent, and I'm personally excited about this. The Ukraine war has opened up the door for the first 2 political information war deep fakes that look pretty goddamn good quality. One of Putin and Zelensky both released around the same time, trying to spin a narrative in different ways. So Zelensky's was made seemingly by some Russian actors. In fact, one of the first comments on the Zelensky deepfake was he sounded too Russian to people. So that was a dead giveaway. I guess the Ukrainian dialect is noticeable. I can't tell the difference personally as a dumb American. I have no someone is Ukrainian versus Russian. The Putin one, I think that it was basically saying that they're surrendering. I don't remember, but basically there were two deep fakes coming right off the heels of each other. And I was like all excited. I'm like, wow, we're already at like the top level of like information war, fog of war, total confusion, don't know what to trust. And now we get, boom, two deep fakes, pretty good quality.
Really?
And
I could tell because of the pixels. You know what I mean? It's not my first Photoshop. I'm joking.
It might have just been a face app or something, like some cheap one.
Yeah.
No, but I think that it's exciting because it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we're barreling towards this zone now where it's like we really do not know what we can trust, at least especially like photographically video. I mean, it's really, I think, hard at this point. And it's not, you don't even have to do deep fakes. I mean, even just something as simple as being like all these people in body bags, where the Ukrainians are pretending they're dead soldiers are actually crisis actors. And look at this video of this guy covering up his own body bag, and it'll be like a video from some exercise from like 10 years ago in the United States. Like it won't even have anything to do with Ukraine. And I almost feel like that's more of a problem than like just the digital manipulation, because it's just the contextual lying or manipulation is very, very common. And even, I mean, it's weird is even the Russian embassy official Twitter account has put out stuff in the last few months where it's just like, are you guys like just trying to throw like just totally random stuff out there, like almost like as a troll, or is there some strategy to putting out blatantly fake things? And I don't really understand it. I mean, like they went from posting something about how they found a race-specific bioweapon in one of the Ukrainian labs, which, I mean, I believe personally that these labs are really sketchy. But some of the things that the embassy is saying about it, it's like, I don't know. I mean, that sounds a little over the top. And then they're like, the next tweet, they'll post like a Candace Owens tweet. And it's like, are you guys really managing this? And like, who's managing this goddamn embassy? Like, I want to like hire me, please, or somebody else, maybe like an American leftist or somebody who's going to get in there and like, make sure you guys, social media is a little more dialed in. But I don't know. It's a total mess. I mean, I find it very difficult, even just like the amount of disinformation that's come out since it started. Like when you mentioned the ghost of Kiev and Snake Island, I'm like, damn, that feels like it happened like 10 years ago.
I know.
Like that's how much intense blast of like just information and disinformation we've gotten since the beginning of this. I mean, it feels like, I don't know. I mean, it's overload. So I don't even know how regular people keep up with it, because I can barely keep up with any of this stuff and filter through it. I mean, I wouldn't even dare to tweet out or retweet like a video from Ukraine at this point without like vetting it for at least, 30 minutes or something because it's just like so many of it ends up being fake or manipulated or out of context that I do not know what to trust anymore. And I mean, how can you trust print information either when it comes to the on the ground situation in Ukraine? Very difficult. I mean, I think all we can do at this point is just go by, okay, here's how much money we're sending to them. We have it on paper. We know. Here's how many weapons we've sent to them. Who's in command over there? How many Azov battalion people are there actually over there? Because they're blatantly, there's no denying or trying to whitewash them. We can argue all day about if Zelensky is Nazi sympathetic or if other people in Ukraine are, but we know for a fact Azov Battalion is a blatantly Nazi organization. So let's at least work with that and the facts that we can have there. So I guess that's like the only thing I feel like I can do and other people can do right now to really get a clear picture. Because I think the rush to be first, the rush to put out stuff right away as it happens is sort of a trap that journalists or really anybody gets into, because especially with a developing situation like this, you don't know if you're posting a fake video or disinformation, and really look into it. And I just don't think you can trust what's coming out on social media at all from either side. And I tend to probably trust, or I'm more sympathetic to the Russian side, but I don't take anything they're saying right now at face value. And that's what bothers me about this Ukrainian bioweapons lab argument. It's like, I see so many people on the left now saying, oh, the Russians are trying to pull their own WMDs hoax in Russia. How convenient. And it's like, well, maybe let's actually look at the actual facts of this. So it's not just reacting against what Russia said. Because, yeah, it's like whatever they're saying could be BS. It could be exaggerated. But what is actually happening in those labs? Like, I want to know. And I want to know from a perspective that's not some U.S. government official just like fucking, spinning it and making it seem like it's fine. And they're just like baking cookies over there or something. So
we're talking about the labs that were alleged. Okay, hold on. They were alleged by like, I can't even, what's the journey here? They were alleged by Russia that they were in Ukraine. There were like biolabs, and then everyone's like, no, they're not there. And then like Victoria Nuland a couple days ago, we're worried about these biolabs, and everyone's like, wait, the biolab, they're real? Is that a bad cartoonization of what happened there?
No, it's exactly what happened.
Okay,
I mean,
so what the fuck?
the weird thing, Dan, is that like, I felt like this kind of landed in my lap as like being totally in my wheelhouse as exciting subject material. On one hand, we have bioweapons, which is something I've been covering for the last year or so with anthrax and smallpox. And then on the other hand, we have Victoria Nuland lighting the match. I mean, all people, why couldn't she just say no? I mean, like, that's what the U.S. does all the time. They lie. That's what these labs say. They don't make biological weapons. They say it on their PR videos. Why, of all people, she was the one to be like, you know what? We are worried about this. Because she was directly asked, does Ukraine have biological or chemical weapons? She could have said no. But of all the people to light this match, it was her. And honestly, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat a little bit and say,
you're allowed.
I think she maybe did it on purpose. There may be forces inside the Biden administration that want to escalate things beyond a level that Biden is currently willing to. And by lighting these matches or starting these little fires, that's a way to get there. Maybe you watch her husband talk, Robert Kagan, Victoria Nuland, Robert Kagan. He's dismayed by this unmovable position of the Biden administration not willing to send troops. As far as the neocons are concerned, the Biden administration is not willing to get directly involved, even though sending this many weapons and trainers and stuff feels direct enough to people like us. To them, it's not. They think we're not really involved until we actually send in troops. So, when I see him talk like that and how dismayed and sort of resigned he is to that, sort of like, well, that's the reality. I don't like it, but that's how things are. You kind of have to wonder if his wife, she's in a position. She just lit one match, whether by accident or on purpose, and it kind of got this conversation to a new level of prominence that I don't think it would have been. Like, just what she said alone brought this topic into the dialogue in a way that, I think it's here to stay now. She really did sort of propel it and kind of give the Russians, whether she meant to or not, kind of exactly what they wanted to amplify this talking point. And I find that amazing. And, I got to wonder if she's trying to start some stuff with Russia. And maybe she even got, because Jen Psaki came out right after that and said, like, it seemed like Jen Psaki was trying to do damage control from what Nuland said. And so I'm wondering if Nuland's like in trouble right now, if they're kind of going to put her on the backbencher for now. Because she was starting to become more public during this situation. And I think that also sends a signal to Russia. We're making basically the person you hated the most, besides Obama and the previous administration, we're going to bring her out of the shadows again and start having her, talk about policy in Russia. And that sends a signal to Russia. I mean, I think Russia really, they know all about Victoria Nuland. I mean, they pretty much think that she was behind the coup, so that's pretty much.
Does Nuland want a a Pearl Harbor in Ukraine for them to build their nationalism around? Is that what we're getting at here?
Weird. I mean, the amount of accusations slung back and forth between the two countries about them doing false flags is at a ridiculous level that I don't even. It just like that guy from AP was right. I think it was Matt Lee and he confronted a U.S. State Department official like a month ago, saying like, "What you're saying just sounds like straight up Alex Jones territory. Like that's your line now, is you're saying that Russia's going to start a false flag in order to go into Ukraine." Well, it turns out that Russia didn't think they needed to do anything. They just went in. So they just brazenly went in. They didn't need to do a pretext or a false flag. They at least them. And so this idea now but now we've gone into this new stage where it's like now Newland and these other people are saying that there's an imminent biological or chemical weapons false flag attack that's coming from the Russian side, and they're going to blame the Ukrainians or blame us. And of course, Russia is saying basically the opposite, that, because these labs are there and because the U.S. ran, they can unleash something and blame it on us, blame it on the Russians. So it's getting quite odd. I mean, when you have, these adversarial geopolitical enemies accusing each other of, you're about to launch a false flag. No, you're about to launch a false flag. No, you are. That's like, that's literally what's happening right now. So, I mean, I've never really seen things like that. Let's just say we're in a new era of not just information war, but like rhetoric used between nations to each other that is getting quite strange. And I don't really know where it goes from here, but it creates this atmosphere. I think it just helps. It helps amplify this atmosphere where it makes everybody just more confused, I think. And it makes everything feel more confusing. And I mean, I don't know if there's some intention behind that. Like, is there some goal by the U.S. government to just scorched earth the entire information landscape and just like reset the whole thing and be like, screw it. Let's just flood everything with so much disinformation that nobody can figure out what's true anymore. That's how the only way we're going to get ahead right now. So let's just do that. And then once we do that, let's just like reset it, do Web 3.0 or whatever. We'll get like a newer internet where we can lock things down even more. I don't know, but sometimes I want, the utility this serves of things being so confusing honestly just makes, I think, the U.S. be able to do things like continually promote and work with Azov with no repercussions. Because like CNN and places are blatantly showing these neo-Nazi insignias on Azov, and it's like, don't they care? Aren't they worried they're going to be called out? Isn't the U.S. worried they're working with neo-Nazis so blatantly? And I think ultimately the answer appears to be no. They do not care. Why don't they care? Maybe it's because they don't care about, how many people are really going to be outraged about that. I don't think it's going to catch enough. And I think that they make those calculations. It's like, no, we don't really give a shit. We're going to keep working with Azov. Nobody's going to get outraged enough. Maybe they'll stop if like a prominent Jewish group comes after them, which actually happened the last time. The Simon Wiesenthal Center, which is not that prominent, but they're fairly prominent. They went after the Obama administration in 2014 for basically supplementing some of that money to Azov Battalion, the neo-Nazi militia. And John Conyers, African-American congressman, was sort of working with the Simon Wiesenthal Center to be the representative of that, the idea that we should not be working with neo-Nazis. And he went on the floor. They actually he got Azov excised from the bill, which seemed good. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll get this neo-Nazi group excised from getting the funding. And the Pentagon changed it in secret. They somehow changed the bill. I don't know exactly how they were able to do this, but they let John Conyers act like he got a victory. The Simon Wiesenthal Center thought that they had moved the Obama administration away from this. And yet this, I think, is really the key to understanding the relationship between what we're doing and these neo-Nazi militias. We were so intent on making sure Azov got some of that $300 million that we changed the bill in secret. It's not like we couldn't live with sending these $300 million of supplemental to every Ukrainian militia except for Azov. That wasn't acceptable to us. We needed Azov also. And I think that really says a lot. It's like, why did we need them so bad that we were willing to do that? I mean, it's amazing to me. And I think that that's anyone who's denying the level of neo-Nazi influence there, I think really needs to look at that and answer for that. We can argue all day long about the stupid, I don't think Putin is denazifying Ukraine. I mean, I think that definitely a BS line. That doesn't mean that there's not a huge Nazi problem in Ukraine. Both things can be true. And I think that that's, kind of probably where I land on that. So.
One thing that blew me away in my own research was finding out that Israel itself is sending Uzis to these Azov guys. There's literally pictures of them, and it's just blowing me away. They're Israeli-made Uzis, and you're like, well, there goes the game. Yeah, there they go. It's holding an Israeli-made Uzi.
No, it's amazing. It's
sort of mind-blowing stuff. I had a thought. I can't remember where that was going. We were vibing. We were hitting it. Oh, one thing is oh my God. I'm just on Twitter. I'm on Twitch. I expose myself to the public probably too much at the cost of my own mental health. Way to go, Dan. Good job. Pat yourself on the back. But here's the deal. I've had someone literally tell me the other day in my Twitter mentions. I'm like, well, why aren't you worried about arming Nazis? And they say to me, well, we'll worry about those Nazis later, after we take care of the Russian Nazis. And I'm like, well, here's the thing about that. When you're not worried about arming Nazis, you've just told on yourself. If Nazis aren't an existential threat to you, you might want to ask yourself why that is. Anyways, so it's not much of a question, but it's just sort of stunning, the kind of mental gymnastics, minimization of Nazis, it just downright ignoring they exist, or somehow not seeing that they're actually ultra fascists. And we're not just saying Nazis in the sense that like, oh, we don't like those guys. Like they're like they got direct lineage. We're looking at this Azov battalion guy. That Nazi symbol is the Nazi S that used to be on the Panzer tanks that the Germans used. They don't do this just by accident. They got tons and tons of other Nazi symbols, and they can't. A worldwide corporate media cannot seem to stop taking pictures of them, as you both talked about on your podcast that just dropped yesterday or the day before, and I'll drop that link in the chat right there. So yeah, I recognize it's there. Putin's not denazifying Ukraine. I don't believe that for a fucking second. If that were what is happening, I'd be pretty happy about that. But that's not the case, because you can't be happy about war. There's just too many fucking civilians whose lives are wrecked in the process, and that's the thing that's absolutely sick. You know what I mean? People seem really quick to want to pick a side in war, like, oh, I want this side to win. I'm like, whoa, hold on, pump the brakes. Do you really know what's going on over here? Where's the material analysis? You seem a little bloodthirsty. So I'm not sure where I'm going with this. I think where that leads to, and maybe what I want to talk about, unless we had more to talk about the labs, I don't know what to talk about that. But my next question, and we're pushing the hour here. Oh, we're at the hour mark, Robbie. Here's the deal. I respect my guests and their time. I want to give you an out right here. Let me know if you need to go. Please excuse yourself. And otherwise, you're welcome to stick around. Just because I was hoping maybe briefly we could talk about sort of like the censorship that we're looking at right now.
Sure, yeah. No, I can stay for like another 15 minutes or so. If that
Perfect.
works.
So I think maybe one of the things that's leading us to this place where things are getting censored, Abby's show was pulled down, just about 550 to 600 episodes of that. Hopefully they're able to download those from the discs that your mom had, apparently. I hope that works out. I really do, because that would be fucking depressing. I've been here on Twitch trying to develop anti-imperialist ideas, and I'm starting to come to a better foundation of that. And I've only been doing this for 2 years. If all of my content, well, number one, it doesn't all get saved, but if it did, and then if it all got wiped, I'd be very fucking sad. So that's really scary shit. It also is representative of it's a form of censorship. I'm not going to say it's necessarily they're like breaking our First Amendment rights, but it's a form of censorship, not necessarily government censorship, though we may discover that one day if I can just affix my tinfoil hat for a moment. So RT America or RT in general just is offline in Europe. Is that right? RT America has been pulled. Well, they sort of shut down operations. I was talking to Anders Lee, who was on Redacted Tonight the other week. Anders was telling me that they pulled it down because a lot of producers and just staff couldn't do it. Not a lot of on air people, but everyone else supporting the show. There just wasn't enough to keep it online. They mentioned maybe something about sanctions. There's a couple other people that have been pulled down. Brian Berlatic off of Twitter. There was a thing with Oliver Stone's movie, at least for a minute, Ukraine on Fire. I don't know if that's still pulled down or if it was just pulled down for a minute. Okay.
I'll just say that about that movie, that's a supplement. If you want more backstory on history of Ukraine on Fire is great. It adds a lot of historical context.
Yeah.
But the advertising for the documentary is a little bit misleading. I remember when I first saw it, actually the thumbnail image of it is like Victoria Nuland and Robert Kagan on it. I was like, oh, what is this movie? Like, is this going to be covering the same things I am? They're actually barely in the movie. So I feel like if you're thinking that they're kind of two similar films and you should only watch one or the other, don't do that. Watch both of them actually, because they supplement each other really well. And I think that, my documentary, it covers a lot of the more present context, a little more thoroughly. Whereas, and I don't even think Stone directed it, someone else. But Stone, it covers a lot of like the early World War II, Ukraine stuff. It goes all throughout the 60s and 70s. There's a lot of backstory there that, I had no idea about. So just throwing that out there in case anyone wants to learn more about it.
I would watch Years if I had to pick between the two, knowing what I know now. I think Years gave us more of like a theoretical lens through which to see what's happening. In that you helped us to define and spot neoconservatism and those forces that were at play, instead of just saying, "Oh, it's Victoria Nuland," and barely mentioning that her husband and her family are it's like a whole legacy. So yeah, I would say yours is better. Well done. Congrats. Oliver Stone, eat your heart out. I hope he sees this. He's such a cuck. Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at what's happened to Abby and some others, and this is really scary fucking shit. This is why Abby was opposed to what's his name from the InfoWars getting sort of banned from a lot of different platforms. I'm sorry, totally tripping on the dude's name. Alex Jones, right? So she I guess was right, because of course leftists are going to be on the other the first against the wall when those forms of censorship hit our side, and now we're seeing that. I think that's undeniable. It's really fucked up, and I'm a little bit on edge and scared. Not necessarily for me, although it makes me think I need to work harder in my anti-U.S. imperialisms. They should be thirsty to pull me down. That's right, FBI Fred. Are you watching me? NSA Ned, you son of a bitch. You owe me a subscription. Yeah, those guys suck. But okay, censorship. Is this something we're going to see more? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you to predict the future, and that's fucking stupid. But what do you think? It's not like a First Amendment thing, is it?
I think it is, because,
okay.
I mean, technically it's not.
Yeah.
But I think really what this is all leading towards is basically an eroding of the First Amendment. You might have the shell, the exterior of it left, and be like, hey, we got the First Amendment, check it out. But it's just going to be sort of a hollow husk by the end of this process. And I mean, I think it kind of already is pretty in that territory already. It's like, we do have a First Amendment, but let's take the internet completely out of this. I mean, at will employment in this country, you can get fired pretty much at any time from a job for saying anything that offends, your boss or management or anything. It's kind of, I mean, that alone, to me, that just like alone sort of flies in the face of the First Amendment. If you only get protected for political speech, which you're supposed to technically be protected on the First Amendment at a place of employment, I don't really think that actually is something that stands up very well in our society. I mean, generally speaking, I think most people accept the idea that if you say something politically offensive at the workplace, you should, you have the right to be fired. And I think that mentality, or just that acceptance of that, makes it very easy for people to also be like, well, it's a private company on the internet. They have the right to remove whatever content they want. And technically they do. My argument about this is that these corporations have essentially tricked a lot of people into buying into their system because it's convenient, because it helps get our stuff out there. Basically Twitch, you could argue, is a form of social media, or YouTube is too. It helps boost, or the algorithms help spread the videos around. But on a certain level, I mean, we're doing this to ourselves, in the sense that by giving away our own autonomy, our own control, our own hosting abilities, it's kind of our fault, because we've allowed these corporations to have all the power. Now that makes it so that we have to trust that they're going to respect this sort of principle of the First Amendment, even though technically they don't have to abide by it at all. We need to just sort of have faith that, well, this company's got, hopefully they believe in free speech, right? And I think we're seeing more often than not that that's just not working. Corporations will cave. It's not just YouTube; it's also Vimeo. I think Ukraine Fire actually got banned from Vimeo for being Russian propaganda, and it's like, well, that means a very heavy agenda could probably be banned off there if it got big enough. And that's the other side of it. If you're not big enough, they can, when I say they, whoever is interested in censoring you, can essentially shadow ban you, or sort of like cap off your following in a way where you probably never even know that you were being censored. And I think that that's a whole other level of insidious, the sort of shadow banning, suppressing someone's reach, limiting their reach before they get big enough. So it's like, and then it also, I mean, one of the worst parts about it overall, let's say if the First Amendment stays intact, and it's intact enough where you can still make win a good free speech argument to the Supreme Court or whatever. The other dangerous aspect to this that I think is very dangerous, and that's already happening on a mass level, is a psychological chilling effect. We do not know as a society anymore exactly what the rules are for what we're allowed to say and not say, even just politically. I'm not even talking about race, discussions about race or gender or anything like that. I just mean just politically speaking, that's okay now according to the rules. What can you talk about in regards to COVID, in regards to side effects of the vaccines? How much can you speculate about that, or pontificate about that, or push back against some of that stuff before you're actually violating the rules of Patreon or Twitch or YouTube? I think that because of that ambiguity, and because it's simply just happening so fast, and they're accumulating all these new rules so quickly, we as content creators are stuck in this space, unfortunately, where I think that there's inevitably going to be self-censorship happening. Self-censorship of worrying about, well, if I say this, sort of skating around the edges, creating boundaries in our own minds that we may not even be fully conscious of. And I think that is actually probably the greatest danger of this censorship now, is that, yeah, it's a big deal when Abby's breaking the set, has all the episodes taken offline. It's kind of creates a spectacle. It's like we all worry and get upset, and in Abby's case, devastated, sad. It's a big deal, but we never hear about stories about a content creator self-censoring or experiencing a psychological chilling effect, mental prison of their own making, where they're afraid of getting their content yanked because simply people do not. I think it's hard. It's very hard to be vulnerable enough and open enough to admit that, to like even say, you know what? I'm worried I'm going to self-censor myself because of this chilling effect. And I think that it's hard to admit that. It's hard to accept that. But I think that I don't know how to address it, but I do think it just needs to be like discussed more. Like there needs to be, even when the Edward Snowden scandal happened at The Intercept, I remember being really surprised by, this place has a $250 million budget. They can't hire like a psychologist or someone who's is an expert in mental health to explain what kind of chilling effect this will cause and what this is going to do to our psyches and how this is going to change our views on personal privacy and what psychological ripple effects that are going to have moving forward. It bothered me. And I think right now we're still missing some kind of, I don't know if it would be even called a mental health approach, but maybe just more of like a self-awareness, mindfulness approach to this work and be like, well, what level of self-censorship am I okay, or not self-censorship, but just like chilling effect, am I willing to endure before like this becomes something that I need to talk about and make a big deal about? And can I admit that I'm worried I'm going to, self-censor or not say something because I'm worried that Patreon is going to pull my account or something? I mean, so I think it really has vast implications in that direction. And that to me is what's most scary about it.
Yeah,
Because it's hard.
Excuse me. Yeah, so like these artificial ceilings of understanding that are imposed on us because we're not given content to check out anymore, and because of that, we reach a lower level of understanding. And as we're talking in our circles, trying to get a better understanding, that chilling effect keeps rippling out, and that's fucking awful. I'm sorry to say what you just said, but in a stupid way, but that's my job.
No, it is. It's I don't know how you address it. I mean, so many people on the left and in the liberal sphere seem to be okay with purging all these accounts, censoring them. People were gleeful when it came to like QAnon being basically erased offline. I mean, I've never seen social media companies do as good as a job as they did during that QAnon purge. I mean, they really weeded out almost everybody. I mean, and it's like at a certain point, it's like, well, as a journalist, as someone who's been studying QAnon and wanting to understand what it is, now my job is like 10 times harder because now I have to like search out and basically like scour the internet for the QAnon stuff because it's been all erased. To me, it puts all people at a disadvantage who are like just looking at it from the outside and study it or cover it. It's like, why would they do that? I do not understand. And I mean, just controlling the flow of information seems like it's the ultimate goal. So I guess, putting the QAnon people or even the Trump people on basically their own lane of the internet seems to have been useful for some people. And I just don't get it. I think it's really bad. I mean, I want to know what Trump people are thinking. I want to know what QAnon people are thinking. Otherwise, yeah, like why wouldn't we want to know? We just want to like pretend they don't exist anymore. It just doesn't make sense to me.
It would be nice, but no, it's not reality. You mentioned Robbie. You mentioned looking into QAnon. Do you want to maybe mention any future projects that you're working on? Anything you could tease us with? A little tease.
Sure. So I mean, I have looked at QAnon in the past. Two of our more popular Media Roots episodes was sort of like a deep dive into QAnon, looking into from the perspective of, what aspects of it was a psyop, who in the government was maybe benefiting from this. Were there any Trump people involved in this? How did it start? So that's that episode. It's a 2-part episode that came out on Media Roots Radio about, I want to say like a year ago. And I mean, ever since that 2-parter, I feel like I've kind of gone deeper and deeper into these like long form investigations on Media Roots Radio. We ended up doing a Freemasonic history of the United States miniseries, which ended up being like 45 hours long, crazy in depth amount of information. That's sort of on pause right now. There's, I think, 8 episodes of that podcast out. The newest thing we're doing that's sort of a similar in-depth investigation is about a very forgotten thing that happened during the Bush administration where basically the final I was going to use a crass word there. The final I'm trying to think of another word that has the same level of impact. But let's just say that the Bush administration really worked us as a people. And I'd say the final FU, the final like major manipulation that they tried to play on us was getting Americans to believe that they needed to take the smallpox vaccine to inoculate themselves from a bioterrorist attack using smallpox. And Media Roots Radio has basically done a completely original investigation on this. As far as I know, I mean, it's really the only piece or like unpacking of this whole story that anyone's really ever done. There's been other people who have written here and there on different aspects of it, but this mini series that we've done on the smallpox vaccination plan they had has a lot of eerie parallels to the COVID era. It's very strange. It may seem like an obscure topic to people, but I think the podcast that I've done shows that it really did play a crucial role in the Iraq War, and it's kind of the topic's coming back up again. I mean, you're hearing about these Ukrainian biolabs. They allegedly store materials from the Soviet biological weapons program, and the Soviet biological weapons program and them supposedly making smallpox as a weapon has actually shaped a significant amount of U.S. policy for decades. Just this idea that this smallpox weapon may be out there somewhere. And we don't know where it is, but we know that the Soviet Union used to have it and now it's gone. And who did they give it to? Who did they sell it to? Who stole it? Has always sort of been in the background of American policymakers' minds as sort of like a doomsday weapon scenario. It's even worse than a nuke for some of these people, because a rogue actor with one nuke can do an enormous amount of damage, but it's not going to destroy the planet. Now, if a rogue actor released smallpox, it could possibly throw the world into such a chaos that it could basically destroy society as we know it. So this is something that's driven policy for a long time behind the scenes. And my goal with this podcast was to sort of take the veil away from that and show like these people behind the scenes think in these really crazy apocalyptic ways, and they still do. And we just don't hear about it very much. But, we hear Bill Gates recently say that he's worried about the next pandemic being smallpox. Well, I mean, some of these policymakers have been thinking that that's an inevitability, that terrorists are going to hit with smallpox eventually. And that's something that we just all have to expect. So if you're interested in checking that out, we unlocked 2 of the episodes of it on SoundCloud. But the rest of the episodes are accessible if you become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Media Roots Radio.
All right. And I'll go ahead and plug that into chat. All right. And there we go. Robbie, that was really great chatting with you, getting to know you a bit, getting to know your story, fleshing out some of those details that about some of the stories that we already known. Amazing, absolutely amazing. This is one of my more mind expanding conversations. I feel like you've given me new rabbit holes to go down. It's very exciting. I love that. So, Robbie. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for telling us a little bit about these upcoming projects. I'm very much looking forward to watching parts 1 and 2 of your trilogy. And of course, we talked about the prequels. Those are going to be great. real quick, for folks who don't know, Robbie is a documentarian filmmaker of the trilogy film A Very Heavy Agenda. I think part 2 has been made public on YouTube, and I could find that and drop that in chat shortly. But folks, yes, that's a really great one to watch. If you're going to watch only one video on the conflict to try to get a little bit of background, might be the one. I got a bunch of videos if you want, but this is, if I'd have to pick the one at the top, this is the one that goes into depth the most, and again gives you the theoretical lens to understand the conflict. Robbie Martin, you've been a really great guest. Thank you again for being with me. I'm going to let you go. Peace and solidarity. We hope to talk to you again soon, okay?
Thanks, Dan. And everybody, and take care.
All right. Peace. All right. That was a good one, chat. We did it. Don't pay attention to that. We did a good one.